Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Happy Saturday and welcome again, Sana A. Khan. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. How are you, babe? Good. How are you?
I am doing good, and I want to welcome everybody to the group chat. And this edition of the group chat we call Radical Power, because what you and I have been talking about is what does power look like, how to align, to ourselves. And we've just been having some amazing conversations. But what I would like to do is just, pick up. I feel like we had such a really good discussion and a good flow. I would like to, basically pick up where we left off last week. And first I wanted to check in, and I'm sure our audience will want to know how things are going. Did your parents, how's everything going? Because, I told you before, I feel love for you. I feel connected to you. I feel like, we have a bond. And so I've been thinking about it all week. So, yeah.
So the good news is everything passes, and whether you like it or not, which is actually a great thing. But yeah, for those who maybe hadn't listened to the past session, and I know a few people have had issues with, I think, just the platform in general today, it seems, overall. It wasn't just you, Vonda, what I was telling Vonda last week was that my parents had just left for Pakistan, and with everything that's the overall environment and the things that are out of our control, we're taking quite a, they're really coming center stage for me in terms of impact in my own life, right? As opposed to an argument with someone who doesn't want to own their supremacy or their degree of racism, because these are degrees, right? It's an array and it's a continuum. Instead of going into that kind of conversation, which I can disconnect from, this was very much in my life. And my father is having some health issues. So I think he's like, as soon as he got there, like 2 days later, he's like, yeah, I'm actually doing much better here now because of the healthcare issues here. And I think this is going to be a great entry into, after you've talked about the conference, into some of the topics that we were going to discuss regarding integration. And so, but that being said, Vonda's asking about how that's going. I think it's going to be up and down like this for a while, but my release, my crying, and my needing to let emotions pass and move through, I think has happened. And then I had some drama at home because that's also part of our lives, and so then managing that through. So the key is, yes, things will keep happening, but how are we responding to it and flowing with it rather than resisting and fighting it,
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm so glad. And I feel it and I could see it in your face, because your face is lighter and your countenance is lighter. And so I was so glad that we got to see each other, because I couldn't really tell over text because I was distracted this week, because I figured out some stuff for myself. But what you just said, Sana, is a perfect segue about the conference, because it was the Belong by Dawn conference. And the theme of it was owning it, right? So talking about owning yourself and what that looks like. So that directly correlates to the same stuff you and I have been talking about. Yeah. And we came away with 3 things, right? So I did the closing along with Brittany Janae Harris. who is the creator of this thing called Liberated Love Notes, which is this beautiful gift that she has given to all of us to help counteract that narrative, that colonizer mindset, that white supremacist mindset that's telling us we're not good enough, right?
Yeah.
So she and we close it out. But the thing that connects the most with what you just said, right, about that integration, was I said, so I listened to so you know how when you go to a conference and there's 2 sessions at the same time and you like, damn it, I want to split myself in half. So
that used to happen all the time, especially in tech conferences for me, because there were things that I wanted to learn, and then there was things that everybody else expected that I should be good at, you know, and I used to want to split myself up too. And this is so telling, though, so symbolic, that we want to be in 2 places at once and not being able to be present with one fully, because of trying to meet other expectations and then also mapping ourselves. But keep going. Yeah.
That's it. Perfect. That's exactly it. So to that point, right, I said, okay, pick a lane. You go to these. You can watch the other ones on the replay, because I know I can watch the other ones on the replay. So that's that helped me center my brain. So so I watched sessions from 7 o'clock to the end of the day. I did the last one. Here's my 3 takeaways, and this is what I would love to get feedback and hear what people think and hear what you think. So when you think about Dawn's I want to say her tagline or her theme and the way she talks about belonging, right? She talks about claiming and creating, or creating and claiming, right? So think about creating and claiming your life, your space, your career, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's the underbelly of what this is, right? Claiming and creating space, right? So then it was about owning it. So you had women, dope ass Black women up here talking about everything from, first we had a chef, Chef Mimi in the Bay.
Nice.
She connecting. Now this is what you gonna love, and I just got chills because I'm great to tell you about it. Let me tell you, girl. I got to sit up. I got to get comfy. Chef Mimi is talking about yams and sweet potatoes and connecting African and Asian culture across food, across the yam, sweet potato, right? And she's in the Bay region, and she's talking about these different things that she curates, these different experiences. She got a Black food and wine experience and all this stuff. But the connecting us as human beings through food, and then helping us see in the way she was doing it. It was so much love in there. Like she was bringing all our culture together. Like she was bringing us together at our at that, like that foundational level of who we are as people.
Right.
Come on, girl, food.
Yeah.
So well, it's so, she started the conversation.
So funny that you say this and so perfect, because just this week, so there's a fireside chat group, and it's for the key focus is for immigrant people, like people who've come through immigrant experiences, first, second, third, fourth, I don't care, generation. And Shiva Rufe leads it. And so Farzeen and Shiva Rufe and Sara Faruqi, so Sara Faruqi and I joined Shiva sessions among a few other people. And this week's topic was food potluck. And it was about specifically food-related experiences and the memories. And for me, power was one big element of it, because of my personal relationship with food in terms of giving up my power, and then what we talk about claiming. And then once you claim it, then you realize that the word claim can be misleading. So Sarah, for example, was talking about, I was talking about grief, and this was Wednesday. And by Wednesday, the full release was going on for me regarding my family, but also what was going on at home. And that combined sense of what it means when we say guilt, but then it's not quite guilt, because guilt leads to shame around food. It goes through also grief. And then when you release grief, what is available, which is love. And so it's, so there's ways that we connect. We connect through pain. We also connect through fear. We also connect through love. And so, I really do believe this is important, because when I used to go to these spiritual environments, usually white heavy, because of, like I've mentioned, they've a number of people here and in Europe have been in corporate environments. They've gathered enough funds and money through multiple generations of their past ancestors, skimming, thieving, or not, entrepreneuring, or service or whatever you want to call it. Yep, there's a lot of arbitrage there across the world that, and they know it. They know it as well. There's something I talk about, that trying to get someone to admit what's in their history is futile because they're coming with that knowledge. The journey for them is to own it and release it, right? To release the shame and guilt and make something of it. But when we come back to this, my point was that in spiritual groups, often people who have that kind of money show up because they're able to spend between $3,000 and $7,000 per retreat. And so then they'll either, go into plant medicine or yoga or other kinds of retreat forms, with either shamans that are of European descent that have trained in local arts, right? Or local indigenous practices and traditions, or indigenous folks themselves. But then often when you hear them talk, they'll talk about, we all need to be in love. We just need to be in love. Not wrong, right? That is correct. But again, it's about the place from which this comes from. It goes back to our inside discussion, right? So if you're saying, food is awesome, which happens a lot in my grad school, food diplomacy, culture diplomacy, sports diplomacy. How do you connect people through these experiences? Well, you can connect it through the experience and then almost make static that culture, right? Like, so if it's Jamaican food, or if it's, codfish, or it's yams, and you could just literally embody all the culture in that food element. And then say, I love it, and I've been living this culture. And then also not learn more about the culture outside, that whose pain, grief, love, courage, perseverance, all bravery, all went into that food and that creation of love, right? And so there's an element of where the place from which something is coming from. So I don't disagree with all those people in those groups that I've now gotten to know, and many of whom I love. But we have these conversations like, yes, we can bring the presence of full love, but you got to bring your honesty too. And that's your journey. And I can't preface my love and my experience on that, right? And I get to experience my culture as well. And you get to experience your grief without necessarily having to fully do your allyship journey, which is a corporate term, in my opinion. But also that I get to live with my people and experience that without having to apologize or justify or explain my experience, and just be in the presence of it, right? So I think what you're saying is so critical. Again, though, it's from the place from which it comes from. And you'll feel it. You'll feel it because you're among powerful Black women. So you felt that experience where you're not being exoticized. You're not being frozen. You're not being beautified in a certain shape that is palatable. You are getting to come with all your power and then be in the love of that. So your love flows, not your fire burning to scorch, but your fire burning to warm and heal, right? It's very, very important.
And you know what? So near the end, right, we got into that, and we talked about it. So speaking of healing, there is a woman named Liz Springer, and she has an app called Innovators Influence. But this Liz Springer is an innovation strategist. And part of what she was talking about was what you were saying, right? And the integration of your purpose, your plans, the way you're just being, right?
Your intention.
Your intention. And so I think I told you when we first started talking how I have a bunch of domains that I own, and I had all these ideas around intentions and innovation. Yeah. And I have all these innovation domains, like innovation this, innovation blah, 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 blah. And so, because you have to be intentional. And so to even when we first started talking about this topic, and when we started having conversation about our backgrounds, and we started getting all these synergies, right? Thinking about how that plays itself out in your everyday experience, integrating family, stress, work, politics,
toxic patterns at home,
toxic
everywhere.
patterns.
Yeah.
How about some internal trauma?
Yeah.
Like family dynamics.
Generational trauma. Yes.
Generational trauma. Environmental trauma. What the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And I think to your point on integration, I think it's very, there are a few themes that I was thinking about coming to this call. And I wanted you to allow you to finish your, create that room for you to finish the conference conversation first. Like if there's anything else you want to share around that before we go into integration.
Yeah. So the other things I do, and this makes me, this felt integrative, right? So Chef Mimi, she's talking about the connection of food to people, right? And human beings and what that's like. And then she's curated these places around Black food and wine and redefining what soul food means and connecting from a standpoint of wellness and community, right? Then we had Deshauna Spencer, who is the CEO and founder of Quelly, which means truth, right? And Quelly is a Black media network, and her whole thing is about.
I've heard of Quelly. Yeah, I haven't interacted with, but I've heard.
Me either. But she gave some movie tips on some things that she's watching right now. Wilmington on Fire, Negroes with Guns, Queen of Angola, Africa United. Like she gave these amazing titles for these movies, and she's really talking about having content that shows truth. So it doesn't mean not showing tragedy and trauma, but that's not the whole Black story.
It's not. Black joy. Black joy.
Can we get some Black joy? Yeah. Can I tell you one of the best movies that I loved that had such that juxtaposition of Black joy and drama and all that was oh my God, I can't believe I just lost the movie. It was the movie that when it won, they announced another movie.
Midnight? Moonlight. Yes,
oh
yes.
God, how could I forget that? But I remember thinking some Black boy joy. How about seeing a movie with a Black boy being happy?
Yeah.
So we need that.
I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but part of my experience over the weekend, as because when my dad left, it was like, okay, my mom was going to stay back, and she said, no, beta means son or daughter. I really need to go back because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 months. The numbers were not looking good. Okay. Especially because he got COVID and then the vaccines and, it weighs on your body. And then as he went back to Pakistan, I spoke to him on Monday. He was, I'm getting my ultrasound done. Sana, a lot of the healthcare stresses that come out of being in the States, which is a lot of talk about healthcare and quality of healthcare. But the talk is so much talk and so performative. And then the doing is less so. So it does the reverse, which is it creates its own stress. And most of his stress here is coming from having to go to the doctor. So, his blood pressure will rise when he's going to the doctor. His kidney numbers don't come back, right? Kidney health numbers. They don't come back healthy because he's worried about having to file for the medical claim benefits and being on the phone and going through proving, which, as you know, is a true Black-brown dilemma right now. The amount that we prove and that we explain and what stress that creates in our bodies. So the reason why I raise all this with you, because I was thinking about in that process, it's such a sacred thing to have time with your parents, to have time from the gene pool that you come from, and then get to a place with your parents where they can describe their experiences to you with interacting with that gene pool, because you're interacting with it too, because it's your gene pool as well. But there are so many Black kids out there who don't get time with their fathers, who are alive, who are sitting in what I call the playground to prison siphon. And I've had friends who've had these conversations with them. And one of them was incarcerated and he describes how he got there. And I was like, who would have been able to avoid that path? It's a Herculean effort when it's set up for you like that as free labor. Right. And I think, and then it's not just free and it stays neutral. Then you take that person out of the voting system. You endanger their lineage, right? Because they don't have their father present right? Or their mother present. And then that's one angle of it. And then the other element of presence or lack of presence comes from these wars that have been fought abroad and that have been marketed to American publics, right? Because a lot of brown and black kids or have gone. And I say kids because they might have been 16, 17, 18 years old when they signed up. They give you money, they give you benefits, they give you glory. You get to prove yourself to the American nation, you know, in parenthesis, the white American nation, that you are a true American, right? Yep. And what does that do to you then when you find out? And my husband and I often talk about this because he's a white American, but he's also a veteran. He was not deployed, but he knows a lot of VA stuff. And what happens and what veterans are dealing with. So when you are in those kind of processes, I'm so fortunate that my father, if I'm not with him, it's because he's in a different country, but he's free and he's living a privileged life, and that he gets his healthcare within 8 hours of landing. And, you know, but I know he's there and he's okay. And if, you know, God allows, and he has, because I believe in God, but if you don't, that's okay. If source allows, if life allows, if science allows, he's able to have a smooth transition into a different form of matter, right? Rather than this bodily form, then it'll be through a natural process, and it won't be through what Black and brown kids have been going through here, which is being separated from their parents and separate. You know what I'm saying? So it's such a, there's so much gratitude in that process. There's light and dark to see in everything, right?
And I mean, I have so many chills. I feel so connected to you and everything you're saying right now. Like, because to your point, right? So some things were broken in my gene pool. Some things were broken in my family line that allowed horrible things to happen to kids in my family, including me. And so when I think about that connection, right, to my ancestry and my DNA and my family of origin and my people, right, I think that's one of the reasons that whenever there is a Breonna Taylor or an Aubrey or anybody, it is so deep to me, right? Because I see that. And so today, to be in the company, right, of these women, right, who I can imagine us all in Wakanda together, like literally, right? And it's like I have a vision of what all of the melanated people look like together. Like I have a vision of from the lightest, you know, almonds brown or whatever, right, to the deepest dark
wheatish
cacao.
It's called Pakistan. In Pakistan, it's called wheatish, light wheatish.
Right. Okay. So
it's
from
such
wheatish,
a hierarchical,
right? To Java, right? To onyx, right?
To mocha,
onyx, right?
Onyx,
right. Like I imagine that rainbow of beauty. So to sit today and be like, huh? And it was 13 CEOs who didn't wait for somebody to give them a title that they never was going to give us. Okay.
Right.
And I got to tell you this one statistic that blew my mind. And I read, and you know, we big nerds, and I take nerd as a compliment. And I feel like a nerd is a person that's just cares about one thing, and they, you know, some things, and they dig a lot into it. So I know I'm a nerd, and I'm a tech nerd, and I'm a news nerd, right? But the statistic that came up today. So you know how, and Farzine will love this. The propaganda out there, is that Black women get 1% of the VC money. Now that's a low number. We know that 1% is a low number.
No,
right?
I know this because the women overall get like 3 or something percent.
Yeah. Well, now, so wait a minute. That's what the numbers were. So you ready now? The overall numbers have dropped from 3 to 2. And guess what the percent that Black women get?
0.25?
0.20.
Yeah, that sounds like the ratio that I would know, because I have a ratio for women in tech and what that looks like.
So let's talk about it in 1 second. But so I was like, so she had asked us to guess. So I said 0.5%.
Yeah.
And I thought 1% at the top. So when she came with less than 0.25%, I said, damn. Yeah. So, right, it goes back to, you know, understanding what is it that we're facing and what can we really do. So when I got to be in the presence of all these, you know, Black women and all of this like brilliance and, you know, all kind of degrees, you know, mental health, legal, business, MBAs, the whole gamut of
it's a full gamut.
The whole gamut. And so it was just so amazing. And so it put me on a whole nother thought process, right? Around that collectivism. And I wanted to bring that into the integration piece. Yeah. So, you know, with that, the name of the conference was called the Belonging Conference, BCon 2021. You can look at the replay and catch it. And we're going to do a bunch of promotions for it for people who for people who missed it. But to watch the replay in full, people will have to get a ticket. But I'm going to paste all that information in for people. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about it because I know that because of that environment and the things that we've been talking about, how you were going to instantly like resonate, like what that did for me. Absolutely. And like how beautiful that was and the whole thing. So, you know, so now let's transition right into continuing that conversation because I think it's super, you know, I think it's super important, you know, for people to continue to hear about it.
No, I agree. And thank you for sharing. It's the first thing, because it makes me and my heart so happy to not just see women on, you know, and Black women on LinkedIn, specifically Black women, actually, because brown women, we're struggling like with this, you know, we're struggling because I find, and I say we, because I am part of that group. Us South Asian women really are having a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment in all this, in terms of had access to whiteness, know of our Blackness, and have been constantly conditioned and trained to push it away, which is why it took me so long to own my hair and own my body and own my skin tone, which, you know, becomes a mocha color very quickly because that's my natural form, you know? So but I was always like told by my, you know, grandmother and other people around me, oh yeah, you've gotten quite dark, you know, like, no, it looks nice, but you know, you could use this cream or you could use that cream. And it's a big thing in marriage proposals, you know, to not be so dark. And growing up, this was a big problem. I think there's so much awareness about this now, increasingly so. And with Bollywood's influence, there's been a change in owning that darkness more so. But again, it's because it's trendy, right? And because it's a trend around the world. I mean, I see so many people who are, you know, of European descent who want to tan. And they're like, oh, I love that skin tone. I'm like, do you want everything that comes with the skin tone? I would love for us to have that conversation.
They never want the
you know, and I say with love, and that's my point, right? That we, as we're going through the process of like interacting with you, which you and I talked about, that we don't have any issue in helping train white folks to get here. And at the same time, we can't depend on their understanding or not. They're on their journey. They'll get there when they get there. They'll feel, the more they avoid the shame, the more the shame is going to bring them to their knees. Yeah. And that goes with for anybody on earth, right? When you avoid shame, it keeps coming back in front of you. And it'll keep coming back through multiple different scenarios because that's the lesson you are meant to learn by yourself. No one else. It's you teaching yourself. Yeah. You're getting back to a wholeness that you had when you were a child. So, and I agree with John Lude, what he's saying. They never want the burdens of skin color, only the good things that come with great skin tones. And I think
all the time.
Yeah. Right. And I think, and at the same time, how do you react? So the integration. Now, when I talk about integration, there's a few different angles to this. How do I integrate the fact that I have this knowledge and this awareness from my education, re-education over years, right? About the continuum of color, racial hierarchy. And how do I integrate that with the environment around me, right? Or what somebody asked me over text on LinkedIn, and I invited her to join the show, was that, you know, she's in her authentic self. She's a Black young woman and a professional who is going for a position somewhere. And I also know the environment around her, right? Because I've been there in that environment specifically. And so she has this knowing. And obviously for me, I want to be a mama bear a little bit in this, right? But that's not my job. And it's counterproductive to do that because every woman has her own growth path. Every person has their own growth path. Women can birth in many ways. It doesn't have to be through being mothers to your own biological children, other people's children. You can be friends, supports, guides. There's many ways to do this and birth and help them birth what they're meant to birth and create, right? This is very important because then we start projecting our shit onto other people. And so she gets to be on her own path. And she's going to get to find her own integration with what she knows about herself and what's coming through for her and what the environment is going to expect and want her to keep groveling and proving about herself as best fit, right? Excellent fit. And these two are sort of oppositional. So you'll see it on LinkedIn as well. Oftentimes people will talk about these topics of what people want and what white people will do, won't do, what the environment, corporate will do, won't do. And then we kind of get stuck. We get stuck because it doesn't feel like there's a way forward. So the way forward becomes, okay, I have this knowing about myself, like what we discussed in the last 2 sessions, about my inside, my environment, my circumstances, when I'm ungaslighting myself, right? And I'm decolonizing myself, as I continue peeling the layers and learning all the layers, knowing those layers will never go away, right? Ask Spanish folks in Spain. The Arab bloodline will never go away from them, because it's in them now. And when, Isabel and Ferdinand went through the Inquisition, they ironically ended up kicking out a lot of Catalan people and forced them to go to Morocco because they wanted the Muslims to leave. It's always going to be there. So when you are the product of multiple things coming together, the way to move forward then is to see all of it as it is, see the patterns that arise from being victim, perpetrator, and these paradigms, and then start merging. Why? Because it's already happened and you can't change history. So you start merging and seeing and choosing what you want to create. What are the identity forms you want to claim? And if nothing in that is something you want to claim as it is, you can pick your own stuff to create. I don't have to claim that I am Mohajir, which is Urdu-speaking Indian who migrated to Pakistan. I can claim it as in that it was real and it's fact that it happened. And I'm also Indian heritage, Pakistani born, Canadian naturalized, and American resident. Yeah. And I'll become an American citizen too, with a white bonus son and a white husband. So, these things are all, we choose what that beauty is going to look like for us, how that river is going to flow. And choosing how we attach to different elements of our identity is also up to us. We're attached, but how we attach, whether it's going to be a clean line or whether we're going to keep bumping up like this constantly and then not creating from a place of power,
I mean, so I felt like, first of all, I feel like we could take that in 4 different directions. Number one, because all of it, there's through lines with every piece, right? Yeah. Because it still comes back to what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling is it still comes back to who you or how you decide to identify with power. So do you decide that you have power, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that your power resides in your choices, and that at any point in time you choose what you're going to do. So something that just came out recently from me, and I mean like literally, let's see, it's 3:41 Pacific time, literally within the last 18 hours, something that I discovered about myself and that, people are going to hear more about because I have another podcast that is going to come out within the next week or so. But where I've discovered that I have been fighting the power and fighting against
it's very
things
important.
that were telling me how to be, how to think, what my story is, blah, 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 for a long, long, long time.
Right.
But that still was being countered with all the other messages from the other types of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from
the dominating power.
The dominating power. That's it.
Yeah.
I think dominating power is
the win-loss power.
The win-loss. So it's like we have a certain amount of influence on that power. So if we go back to, our heroine, the whistleblower, right? She's taken a lot of risks. I mean, she's taken a lot of risks, right?
Yeah.
But
going against white supremacy as a white woman, so that's going to happen. Yeah.
And which says to me, she's a rider. That says she's a rider, because I'm just like, but we'll see, right? We'll see what happens.
We'll see how it plays out, and we get
how it plays out.
Cheer on, send her good energy, and support her, and say the right things, and use that, sort of force to write other messages with it that align, regardless of where that ends up. We don't know where that's going to end up, right? So.
We don't. But but I think all of these things, they speak to. The dog is hungry. That's why she's all in my face. These other things, they speak.
I already fed Snowflake. She's out.
And she's like 45 minutes early for wanting food. So, it all speaks to the integration, and I think it goes back to it, right? Because I have decided, and it's been brought to my attention, like I said, more so in the last 18 hours, that I have been executing this power all along, but it was laying in a way that for some reason I'm thinking it was dormant, but it was just staggered. That I haven't, it was staggered, right? And the other thing is, when I'm in certain spaces where I'm not allowed to be as authentic or as genuine or as comfortable, or I can't express an emotion because of, God forbid, angry, right?
Angry black woman.
So, angry black women. So it comes together. It comes together for me so much. And I feel like those are just so many different pieces.
Well,
so go ahead back.
Right now. Yeah. Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Go ahead back to with Jean-Luc saying.
So this
go ahead back to that.
This is really interesting, and we've talked also, Jean-Luc, about code switching quite a bit, because there's also an integration there. Right. And I think one of the skills, I'll address that one first, because it's not surface, because there's many things that lead to a person subconsciously and consciously choosing when and how to code switch, both external environment and internal patterns, and then wanting to be badass in that environment and belong. Right.
Yep.
So and every person's going to have a different way how they code switch, and that becomes your style of fitting in. And then as you're decolonizing, there'll be an art, that your own personal art, in how and when you don't code switch. And then how do you maintain your own code and integrate your black girl code or your brown girl code in that, or black boy, or, just black person code, right? What does that look like when you've already learned that code, right? That external code and the white code. And then there's black or brown person trying to fit in with white code. And then there's a personal inner code. And then there's your own environment code, right? And awareness, it comes back to the same thing. There's going to be an awareness of different codes, and really learning how and when you interact with them. That's a skill. And that alone takes a level of mastery within. And I heard a great definition from one of my colleagues in the space. He's currently in Egypt, which he's traveling, which is that mastery is, because as a master architect, when I left my last workplace, I often think about what it means to be a master. And mastery is a lot about learning and seeing where you could become better and improve, independent of external stories about being too much or too little or not enough or blah, 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 all the distractions, because that's what they are, the distractions from your own path. Sometimes you'll use those distractions because you want your power is, you're staggering your power because it's so much and you're scared of getting shot at, right? And there's fear there because at some point when you were a child, you executed that power and somebody told you, holy, keep that inside. And it could have been another Black woman. It could have been another brown man. It could have been anybody that had said that to you before you even had exposure with white folks. But of course, they're already going to put out those passive aggressive messages, right? That came very early. So as you are decolonizing yourself, it's not, and this is when I come to the next point about avoidance, right? When we talk about I'm going to talk about the words first, right? Inflict and avoid, right? So avoidance is something that can be seen in multiple different lights in a relationship between any two dynamics, any two people. In a marital couple, avoidance comes up when one or both people are not willing to face what's going on at that moment, or as a conflict resolution strategy, it is actually a conflict resolution and peace research strategy, avoidance. When the timing to address that won't necessarily, if you address it right now, won't reap the same results that you want as if you address it at a different point. You may or may not know when that point is going to come, but you just have a knowing that right now you got to focus on something else that wants your attention and that you are ready for, which is why your power was staggered, because we all know when to bring out our power. There is no shame or guilt in it. There's only grief, love, release, and realizing you always had it. So in the case of avoidance, it's the idea that other people's identity, the other people's identification of us, which, is rampant in African colonies, ex-colonies, which I would say in many cases are unfortunately still colonies in the way they're being used for resources and bodies for pharmaceutical testing, et cetera, okay? And warfare. But if you look at it, if we had foreign, like in India, it was the British who came and identified us as, oh, you're Hindu, you're Muslim. Yeah? You should go to temple, you should go to mosque, right? And the rest of you who are getting, through the missionaries, through nuns, are becoming Christian. Here you go, a different pulpit, right? The same applies, for example, with the Belgian colonies when it came to Hutu Tutsi and identification in that. When another person is identifying us and saying, you are this, you get to listen to them and touch that strength. As a child, you might not have this, and that's why you get trauma, right? But as you keep growing older, there comes a point, and I believe it's 30 years old, when it might be, different in age for different people, but generally 30 becomes, I find, a marker when you're like, okay, this trauma is really slowing down the car now. It's the guk that is holding the wheels down and I can't move. So then we start saying, okay, we got to do things differently. So you start going, whether it's talks or retreats or community or finding other ways to connect. And really what you're doing is connecting with the sense of source. In that connection process, you will then learn, okay, so this person can project whatever story, because their identification of me is a story. My identification of me is also a story. You will identify the stories and start separating story from fact. And in that process, you will start seeing things, okay, this person said this, and it just stops there. I don't need it to mean that I am that. I don't need to go prove to them that I'm not that. I just get to listen to them, ask myself, am I that or am I not that? Okay, if I'm not that, I'm not that. Okay, thank you for your input. Cool. Thank you for helping me in seeing that I'm not what you're saying I am. And when the time is right, avoidance versus not, confrontation, I can interact with you on why I am or am not that. But I get to choose the timing, right? That is the only way, in my opinion, that you are able to manage, not control, but manage and play with and create from the circumstances that you have, right? And that becomes such a key element of integration, separating story from fact and being present with the now, not what someone said to you yesterday, not what someone might say to you tomorrow, but what is happening right now, and address story from fact now, and then go based on that. So it will still affect you. But the main thing of life is building the muscle within, because it's there, to start dancing with this in a different way. And then soon you start getting ahead of it,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
I think around 30 is correct. And I remember the question that I asked myself, profanity warning, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing the same thing? Why am I getting upset about this? Yeah. What is this? What is that? And I'm asking myself these questions. And I used to, so I'm a big nonfiction reader. And I probably haven't really enjoyed reading fiction as a hobby for years, because I feel like it goes back to the not enough. So let me read all these self-help books. Let me read all these books about learning style, how to communicate in business, how to do this, how to do that, blah, blah, blah. Let me keep on researching to see if I can fix myself, to make myself fit in. Let me see if I can lean in. Yeah. That shit doesn't work. That shit doesn't work. You got to integrate. So you got to know who you are, right? So you have to. So one of the good therapists I've had, and I've had 2 really good therapists over my life.
And Vonda, I want to make one more point before we close out. But keep going.
Yeah.
Before we can.
Okay. Yeah. So I've had 2 really good therapists, and I had one therapist that was mediocre, pretty decent. But to your point around that piece of when you get to separate fact from fiction, here's what that person said, that therapist said. You ask yourself, number one, if somebody say some old nonsense to you, is it true? Is the first question, to your point. But the second question is it helpful? Is it useful? So even if it's
going
true,
to work for you, is it going to work for you? Integrity, number one. Yes.
And if it's true, even if it's something true, like, Sonia, your hair is too curly.
Yeah.
Your hair is too curly. Okay, that's a stupid sentence, but I'm saying it because somebody might believe that. And maybe it's too curly.
And I'm very gullible, so I will immediately consider it. It's data, Yeah.
So it's data. And for them, maybe it's too curly because you looking less white by having your hair out makes you less white. So that makes a white person feel shame.
Well, it puts another view there of a possible reality that has as much power. And if you're in a negative relationship with power, then this is what happens, right? And I think there is a personal power, but I also want to clarify that personal power is getting misused and co-opted in corporate. Of course, supremacy will do that to anything. Which is that, because you have personal power, you can overcome no matter what circumstances you have. Therefore, it is your responsibility to overcome incarceration, rape, police injustice, all of that, right? And not let it affect you. That is not at all what personal power means. And it's the place from which it's coming and what you use it for, right? There's communal power and there's personal power. And almost always, Vonda, I have seen personal power to come from communal power, right? When white folks 3 years ago used to talk about, well, white isn't really a thing. I'm European, I'm this and that. Stop it. There's a whole culture. There's a whole culture around whiteness where people will use certain terms in white bars and use certain terms that they wouldn't use around people of color. And they feel comfortable using those terms because they understand each other's language. That is a culture. And they get that power at a personal level and institutional level from that communal power. Right?
And so, a perfect example, it is. And to your point, perfect example, I just experienced it when I went to Texas. So I told you I went to my really, really good friend's family wedding, right? Her father got married. And I experienced it, right? Where I would be in conversations with people and they would start to say something that they would normally say. Literally the words were on their tongue and they had to swallow them back because they were looking in my face and I was like, wow, what are they going to say? Like, are they really going to say this in the moment? So,
and there's such an opportunity available though, to your point, and this is where I want to address what Jean-Luc was saying about avoidance. So the reason why I'm stating what I'm stating, because avoidance, as a personality, as an Aryan woman, I have almost never avoided anything in my life. Except maybe owning my power. And I truly believe that I manifested not one, but 2 car accidents, 2 divorces to avoid owning my power. Because the more power you have, the more you're going to bring shit into your life. But that's just my personal belief. And that's not an excuse for systemic shit, right? That's out there that gets thrown at you. And that's a very clear boundary. The things that you control, that you bring in versus things that the environment brings in, right? And your first responsibility is going to be your health. And you go out in concentric circles. Your health, your kids or your parents' health, your nephews, et cetera, your community, your state, your country, your world, the universe. Okay. I don't think we actually stop at Earth. I think we also go to universe, but not from a European-centric over the center of the world perspective. No, as one life form in the universe, right? Of many, many life forms in multiple universes, right? We are contributing to that as well. This is the quantum side of me speaking with my math and tech background. So that being said, I think the avoidance point, right, is very important, because it's not that we are choosing to avoid as in not see, or avoiding from the place of fear or the place of anger, because of course that's going to happen anyway. These are natural processes, and there is nothing, it's actually righteous anger. It's righteous pain. It's righteous frustration, right? So, and you get to own that with your community and people that will see that pain and acknowledge and witness it and share theirs as well. Huge power in that. While you do that, and I talked about this in the last session, Jean-Luc, while you do that, you also get to see, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Mm-hmm. How do I not lose my own inner source of energy and power and my love tank to this process? And so the avoidance I'm talking about there is not actually avoiding the whole thing that's coming up. It's parking that interaction because it doesn't serve you at that moment, right? You're going to fully take it on, right? So when you said, hey, Sana, your hair's too curly, I got to either say, oh, that doesn't bother me, right? That's not what I'm saying. Inside my set, I said, oh, I heard my hair's too curly and I felt a little flitch. Why? I felt a flitch in my body and a flicker. Why? Because yes, I'm sensitive about that. I get to observe myself being sensitive about this. How interesting. And
that's the noticing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is too curly? It's not too curly. It's just fucking curly. Exactly. It's gorgeous.
Exactly. It's beautiful.
You know what I'm saying? But that conversation is the integration. That's not avoidance. That's confronting, but in a productive way is the point, right?
That's it. I mean, and we're going to end it on that note because it is 4:00. The way I feel about it is, so one, people can send questions or topics they want to talk about. Send them to hello@radicalchangellc.com. And we will definitely tackle these subjects and topics. I feel like, as far as I'm concerned, I can't even imagine us running out of topics when it comes to talking about power, period, right? Because it is literally part of everything. So whether we're talking about integration from our personal lives, family, connections, parents, relationships, trauma, or we talking about career and corporate, literally, and how to navigate.
To your point, power stays even after someone dies because you're in relationship with it. That's how important it is. You know what I'm saying? So it's like learning this is very important, but I'll stop now because I know it's 7.
Yeah. No, but yes, absolutely. So we're going to keep on talking. So all I'm saying is the series isn't over as far as I'm concerned. As long as you can fit it on your calendar, Sana A. Khan,
I agree.
You and I are going to continue to talk about radical power. We're going to continue to have this group chat. Invite your friends, invite your family. Check it out on the replay. Of course, there's going to be clips posted. There's going to be links. I definitely, recommend people go back and look at old shows. We're going to start putting some blog articles out and some other things related to it. So stay tuned. Thanks, everybody, for connecting. And we will see you next time. I love you, my sister. Bye.
Love you too. Thank you so much.